Welcome, golf fans, pursuers of knowledge in the almighty dollar. This is your golf guru bringing you the 151st Open Championship, of course, at Royal Liverpool. This is going to be my preview show. We're going to break down everything that we need to know about the course to help us pick the guys that hopefully will win from a betting side and also be good DFS plays. With that said, I'm going to do all the pick analysis and give you my favorite bets for this Open Championship. Super excited. Thanks for joining me. And with all that said, let's go talk a little golf. Okay, real quick, I'm going to recap the Scottish. It feels like it was forever. I'm doing this on a Tuesday because, well, I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to research before doing the Open show. But long story short, you probably already know, of course, Rory wins the Scottish Open, which I believe makes him a winner of the British, the Scottish, and the Irish. I think the only golfer to ever do that. And of course, what you're seeing there on the left is that amazing 2-iron approach that he hit about 202 yards in, stuck it within, I believe, 4 or 5 feet, made the putt, and of course became the champion, 1 stroke over Bobby Mack. Also looked like he had a really good chance to win this thing until Rory went birdie on the last 2 holes. And for Rory, he gets another win in the 2023 season, his last being, of course, the CJ Cup. And then right before that, of course, he won the Tour Championship at the FedEx. So kind of got a monkey off his back. He did not believe when he made that putt that he was going to win that. And I believe I remember also correctly, I did not get to watch a ton of coverage for the Scottish due to, of course, probably things that you saw, some different issues on where to find it. I didn't watch tape delay. Also, the timing of the coverage being on the East Coast, right? These guys were teeing off at 2 a.m. in the morning. But I did get to watch the very end. And, of course, right in front of him putting was also Tom Kim and Tommy Fleetwood, who both double bogeyed the hole and struggled making the putt. So good on Rory. Congratulations. And, of course, he was already probably going to be right up there as a favorite, but with pulling off that win, of course, he and Scotty, I believe, are your top favorites to win this tournament. And then I mentioned I did want to share this. So this is looking at stroking leaders for round 4 at the Scottish Open. So while we're talking about that, kind of a cool picture with Terrell Hatton there. And you can see quite a bit of wind blowing across. I think it was getting up to like 30-mile-an-hour gust. But I wanted to look at this just to kind of see the guys that, had some of the best ball striking. So this is total strokes gained. This is looking at off the tee, approach around the green, putting, ball striking, and tee to green. And if you're curious who was the best, of course, Bobby Mack, who I believe shot like 6 under. Talking about the guys, I talked about there was minimal guys that, went under par for the day on the final round. Bobby Mack definitely was, I think, the leader again, 6 under. I think Corey Connors shot 4 under that day. Nikolai Horgar was like 3 or 2 under. Migazzoli, who he's popped up on a couple majors over in the States, shot like 2 under. Then Rory, I think, shot like 1 under, something like that. Anyways, if you want a list of the guys that, actually played pretty decent golf in those very windy conditions, this would be it right here. And as typically that I always see, Scotty Scheffler handles the windy conditions very well. Of course, the Texas guy. All right, so let's change from the Scottish over to the British Open. Again, as I mentioned, this is the 151st running at Royal Liverpool. Location is Hoylake, England. This course, we've seen a few of the Opens in the past. Of course, quite a bit, probably what you've heard of, is that Rory won here in 2014. And I'll go a little bit into the history, but there's been quite a few changes to the course. A couple holes that have been built specifically just for this Open. Royal Liverpool, I believe, has hosted the Open 13 times before, and your original architect was Robert Chambers. What is different from 2014? It is they took away a par 5 and made it a par 4, so it's not a par 72 anymore. It is a par 71, and it's playing in at 7,383 yards. It's a bit of difference, which we'll go into, but also pretty good distance for a par 71. Everything that I can see, again, I don't get the PGA kind of superintendent text spec sheets, which are very helpful, but I don't have it. But I'm going with what is typically at the Open, and that's typically this kind of fescue bent mix. So that's what I've got across the board, fairways, rough, and greens. You've got a full player field, a bunch of different ways you would get into this tournament. I'm not going to go into all the qualifiers, but, it takes like the top 50 rankings, and then it's all the different qualifiers, and then what have you won in the past. But long story short, it's a full player field of 156. And for the Open, it is cut to T70 and ties. Historical cut line, I mean, this is so dependent on, do we get the Open that we've seen the last couple of years with Morikawa winning? And then, of course, last year at St. Andrews, where they kind of boat raced that course. Cam Smith shooting 20 under? Or are we going to get more of what we seen when Lowry won at Portrush, where, you know, you've got the wind, you got the elements. Again, that's the open that I like to watch. It looks like we're going to get a mix. That's how I see it right now. Of course, we'll talk a little more about the weather here in a moment. Just so you know, Rory won here in 2014. He shot 17 under, and memory serves me right, I think he ended up shooting like 1 under that day, where Ricky and Sergio Garcia actually shot like 5, 6 under. You know, actually marched up the board. I think Rory came in with like a 6-stroke lead, something like that, if my memory serves right. But luckily, he had enough to hold off Ricky and Garcia, who shot 15 under. And then, of course, we remember last year, Cam Smith shooting 20 under, where, you know, Rory was in the lead again. You know, not that he played conservative, but maybe didn't really feel like, you know, Cam or somebody was on his, you know, heel stuff, but Cam just went out and made every putt. And of course, ended up in second, if I remember right, was Cam Young. And then I think Rory ended up like in third, something like that. Pretty typical of these kind of opens. Pretty large greens. I mean, they're all going to differ, but, you know, tons of slope in them, tons of runoff. If you've seen one of these, I think they are somewhat similar. I've got some of more of the course breakdown that we'll get into in places that, you know, I'll shoot you to go actually get a very good understanding of this course. I don't have the number of sand bunkers, but all you need to know, there's a ton of them. And they're those deep pop bunkers with the wall facings. And it's not where typical on the PGA Tour, you hit into a bunker, it's going to feed back down into the flats. These bunkers, right, you can land and be right against the wall and then have to get very creative. How do you get out of this bunker? Where typical bunker play that we have in the States for the PGA Tour, you know, it's not really a penalty. And of course, over in the UK, which I agree, or in Europe, that, hey, if you're in a bunker, you're in a penalty. And you can see, you actually kind of look through here, which I'm sure you've seen before, these high-faced, kind of edged out of the wall of the dirt walls that, you know, it does not allow you to roll back to a flat surface to get, you know, an easy shot out of there. No matter if it's a fairway, which it could be super penal, or next to the green, you're in trouble if you're in these bunkers. No water on the course. I mean, the closest body of water is the Irish Sea, which of course then brings in a ton of wind. So these greens will be slower, just like kind of we saw at the Scottish Open. Probably running somewhere around a 10 with the wind that they're expecting, but somewhere between 10 and 11. So we can look at guys that have done better putting on slower greens. That would kind of fall into almost the past pollen greens, what we see on the vacation swing. Of course, defense, we're going to dive into this even deeper, but there is some out of bounds that's lurking very close to if you go off the fairway on a few holes. Of course, weather, wind, this tall fescue, the deep pop bunkers that we talked about. Bushes was actually from St. Andrews. As far as I know, I didn't notice any of those coarse bushes that they have, but I'm sure there's could be out there. And then we all know, again, being in this very flat terrain, no trees, right off the Irish Sea, the weather can kick up and change at any time. And I think there was, you know, this course a little bit, right, was designed by nature. I think that's even on the grandstand. So it's a very cool, I think, visual to watch the Opens. Just some notes I had. Only 38 players are in the field that played actually in the 2014 event at Royal Liverpool. They actually had a very dry May and June, but they have had quite a bit of rain here in the last couple weeks in July. So the course is very green. The rough is up. And, you know, you can look at that both ways, where if the winds do not blow and the course is softer, right, it's going to be another scoring fest. But everything that I'm seeing, at least we are going to have some wind. Maybe Thursday is going to be maybe the best conditions, and then it's going to get a little tougher as it goes. And then the last thing is this will be the longest finishing 9 holes in the Open history, coming in at 3,822 yards. So just a side note there. All right, just some real quick history here at Liverpool. I already talked about that. Of course, Rory won this event back in 2014, and as I mentioned, came in with a 6-stroke lead into that Sunday morning, I believe. And then I think he shot like 1 under to get to 17. And then Sergio and Ricky made quite a move that day, but still only came in runner-up position. First round leader was Rory, and he actually won this thing wire to wire. If you take a look there, he was a leader in all 3 rounds, which is pretty crazy. You had DJ round 2 shoot a 65. Jordan Spieth had a good round 3. Like Shane Lowry had a 65 on the final round. Just calling out guys that are actually in the tournament. And then, of course, way before that, 8 years, Tiger Woods won this event in 2006. And, it's probably been talked quite a bit about that. He hit a driver on the first hole, never hit it again. He was struggling with the driver, just hit a 2-iron off the rest of the holes, which we're going to see quite a bit. You're not going to see driver. I mean, again, it's going to do with the win, but I mean, of course, Tiger made the stinger famous. And I like guys in this tournament that I know can hit that low ball, hit that stinger, because, again, I think we're going to have some windy conditions. And also, if I remember correctly, on hole 14, he actually holed out for an eagle, which is a very tough hole, and I'll show that in the routing. So yeah, just to give you a little history on Royal Liverpool. And then I also pulled up, usually I don't do this here, but can't do a lot of historical stroke gain data here. But what I can do is if we want to look at the last 5 British Opens, the Open, we can see who's done the best from a total stroke gain data. And of course, Jordan Spieth is up there, number 1, had a T8 last year, a second in 2021, and actually won it back in 2017. So you can see outright, I mean, typically he gets to be creative. Of course, Tommy Fleetwood, we always think at the Open, Rory. Tony Finau, who you saw on my cover, it's kind of, no one's talking about him. I'll just tell you right now, someone that I was interested in, I bet him just because I know Tony's game and what he can do in the win, his shot shape, right? He's, put together quite a few wins and has also showed up here in the Open quite a few times. Of course, also in majors, it's had some seconds. So, I've heard nobody mention Tony Finau's name. I'm actually kind of into playing him, picking him, and we'll see how that works out. Of course, Xander in a grudge match. Brooks Koepka, right, he's got 5 majors. Shane Lowry won at Portrush back in 2019. Molinari, I believe that was Carnoustie in 2018, which is kind of crazy. Kind of could be a very good model, his kind of game, if, you're looking for someone that's just hits a ton of fairways, good with the irons, and was a really good putter then. Of course, Bobby Mack is interesting, right, coming off. Been playing good golf over there, as I talked about in the Scottish Open, but of course had a very good chance of winning that in very difficult conditions on Sunday. Jon Rahm has actually been on a 3-week hiatus, so kind of funny. I think his odds are somewhere around 13-1. Yeah, right here it is on Draftkings. But, he's been kind of out of sight, out of mind. As I mentioned, a 3-week hiatus, and his best showing was in 2021. And then Ricky, of course, playing amazing golf, got his win finally at the Rocket Mortgage. Also played, pretty good at the Scottish Open. Alex Noren had some good showings. It's that low fade. Of course, also played a ton on the European Tour. JR and DJ with back-to-back good finishes here last year and the previous. Okay, so let's look at some differences on the scorecard between at Royal Liverpool from 2014 to now. And if you want to look at the variances, you can just kind of see. So over here is 2023, and then this is 2014. Nothing too crazy on the front. There is some rerouting that's been done comparative to the members. And even if you look at the history of the Open at this tournament, I don't think it's ever been played the same routing. It's kind of changed every time. But the big changes comes on the back. Of course, number 15 used to be a par 3. It is now a long par 5. So a big difference of 459 yards. And then they kind of flipped that and built hole 17, which I believe is called Little Eye, which was built specifically just for this tournament. A lot of the buzz and talk, and I've got an image of that, and we can talk a little more, but it's this short kind of tester, right, that we just saw at the US Open at LACC, this short par 3 that will not play over 135 yards. That's kind of the max. So that was the big changes. And then you've got this crazy number 18 par 5 that it is possibly to be downwind. It could be reached in 2, but there's so much trouble that you can get into. Well, I'll show that real quick. So really, if you look at the differences, a little more distance on the back and a little more on the front. So totaling out plus 71 more yards. So not a big change, but taking away the par 5, which I believe, let's take a look here, was number 16. They took away this par 5. So you got one less scoring opportunity and made it, just a tough par 4. And then if you're curious on the routing, here you go. But that's not why I pulled this up. You've probably seen, if you've been watching the Golf Channel, this course was actually built, which we've seen this before on an old racetrack area. This would be the racetrack right here. And what's pretty significant is number 3 right here this is all OB. If you go, there's like a wall, like a kind of a little wall, we'll say, that follows that track down. And then, of course, on 18, which is crucial, right? Because a lot can change. I think 17 and 18 are going to be very crucial holes on who wins the tournament. A lot could change just on those 2 holes, but out of bounds is right coming down the fairway. So those are the kind of key things I would point out. And then, of course, at number 17, this par 3, which we'll take a look at right here, get you a close-up view. As you can see, just a ton of stuff to look at with the eyes, almost like a Pete Dye thing, just kind of throwing everything at you. But you can see the Irish Sea here, just crazy wind, and this should be end of the wind. You can see pop bunkers, and how Rahm kind of described this is literally like trying to land a ball on a turtle's back. So you got to hit a really good shot to hold the green and to give you a chance for a birdie, but it also could turn into a bogey or even worse. So that's Little Eye, and that's what all the talk's been about on number 17. And let me go back one bit. The best thing that I've seen to give you a quick, nice course breakdown, which I will put in my comments below, but just in case I forget somehow, it's about a 16-minute video, and it's at the CBSSports.com Open Championship, 4 keys to Royal Liverpool. Like, just kind of, screenshot that or whatever and go check that out. I highly recommend it. And then, of course, I was mentioning 18 with the OB. Here you go. Like, you can see from the fairway, you could get, very easily if, the ball could go OB. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But this hole, too, looks like it will be downwind. Could possibly be reachable, even though it is 609. But we'll see how many guys do that, or I guess it's depending where you're at in, if you need to make a birdie to either get into a playoff or win the tournament, we'll see what they do. But of course, if you're up by a couple strokes, you're probably going to play it as a 3-shot hole. Okay, so with all that said, as always, I create a player profile. What am I doing from a stroke gain model analysis? And number one, I want guys that are just really good ball strikers. I think you can see that time and time again. I mean, we talked about Rory, we talked about Tiger, the guys that typically do very, even Cam. But the difference between this and St. Andrews and then even Morikawa, again, is the conditions, and I do believe we're going to have them. And so, Cam Smith, I'm a huge fan of, you guys know, but I think he could have trouble off the tee. Now, of course, these guys will club down off the tee. They're going to be putting, just as Rory did, the 2-iron in the bag. They're going to be putting in whatever hybrids, maybe that's, lofted down, that they're really interested in. So driving irons. So, it's kind of a tricky one on all that. But long story short, I do want the good ball strikers. I want the guys that typically do play well in the wind. From a driving perspective, I'm not as concerned about looking for the bombers. I was kind of leaning that way a little bit, of course, for the Scottish. You for sure have to keep them out of the pop bunkers. Keep it out of the fescue and try to hit it in the fairway no matter what it is you're hitting off the tee. And then, of course, your approach is always king. I'm also looking at 3-putt avoidance. I always do, because typically you're going to have some very large greens, and you're just going to be trying to get these things to hold and beyond the green. So that's something that's interesting, looking at that 25 feet out. A lot on the putting. We're going to need guys that can do some stuff out of sand. Now, this isn't as heavy because I said it's not about, hey, can you get scoring opportunities, or, it's more of guys that can handle the bunkers. But around the green and short game is crucial. Prox to the pin, I'm picking at 75 to 100. My thought process on this is kind of going through the course is that the par 5s look like, you're not always going to be going for them in a 2. So this is the range. Also, if you get into the fescue, which I believe is going to happen a bit, especially if the wind is up, you're going to be, getting out and probably be into some kind of this number. And then always in the majors, we're not looking at guys that go out and shoot a bunch of birdies. Even though I mentioned this tournament could go either way, right now I've got to lean towards the bogey avoidance, and that's how I'll be, kind of building my lineups, unless all of a sudden I see some things different. So with that said, let's talk about the weather. This is what was pulled out of the Open Championship, the PGA, what they're seeing. And I can summarize this pretty quick. We don't care about Wednesday. It looks like Thursday is going to be the best day that these guys are going to have. The morning, maybe like winds are somewhere around like 5 miles an hour. It's going to get up to 6 to 9, and then gusts possibly to 13, which all that is nothing. So right now, Thursday looks like the best round. Friday's going to get a little more windy, gusting up to possibly 20, 10 to 15. Again, as we all know, this can all change. But Saturday for me looks, and it's funny, they don't really talk about it a ton here, but Wind Finder, what it's showing is that this is going to be the windiest day. Also could rain throughout the day. Now, again, I'm recording this on Tuesday morning, so a ton can change, and we'll go over to Wind Finder when I get into the picks and all that to show you where to pull this data. But long story short, that's the day that could cause some issues, and then we'll see what's Sunday. But as I mentioned, this could change at any time. Okay, so with all that said, I mentioned I did create a custom stat model for all of us. And what is it that I am weighting those stroke gain categories? I've got ball striking at 25% of the model, good drives at 15, so that's 40% right there. And then approach 50, what did I got there? 55% of the model is all on the ball striking. And then you got putting coming in with 10%. Around the green is at 10, sand saves at 5. Proximity 75 to 100 at 5, bogey avoidance at 10, and then short game, that's what SG, strokes gained, short game. And if you don't know what that is, short game is taking in around the green and putting. So it's kind of doubling down on those. I put that at 5%. Put that in, and what you're seeing here, just so you know, is the betting odds under money line. That's actually pulling from Draftkings, just so you know where those odds are coming from. I'm looking at the last 6 tournaments or 24 rounds of golf played. No filters turned on. This is purely a recent form model. And with that said, of course, no shocker. Scotty Scheffler comes up number 1. You can see number 1 in ball striking approach. It's the putter that we know that's been causing Scotty issues. Typically, it's at 5 foot in end range. But again, around the green, bogey avoidance, that proximity 75 to 100. He's, top or top 10 on all those stroke gain categories. Tommy Fleetwood, who has done well, as I mentioned in the Open, also is second. You got Hideki Matsuyama, which from an odds perspective, I think a lot of people are looking at from a value. The only thing that I'm a little nervous is what I've been watching Hideki do off the tee. I get the value, but it has been a struggle. I think he did kind of show up a little bit at the Travelers. Yeah, I don't know. It's a number. I think I even saw it at 100 to 1. I've got some goofy bets myself, as you guys always know. Even for this event, but right now I've not bet Hideki. I like Victor Hovland. I was on him for the Scottish. He's had a couple of good showings at the Open, and we've seen him a little more showing up the majors. He had a chance this year to win the Masters, so pretty interesting. Patrick Cantlay, not so much for me. The spots this year on bent greens where I was excited about him, he did not even perform. Now we'll see, but typically he does not show up in majors. I always go back to the last time in my brain that he had a chance was the Masters. I think it might have been his first Masters he played back when Tiger won, back in, 2019. You got Rory, of course, the favorite. I think the odds have shifted where him and Scheffler are both at 7 to 1. Wyndham Clark, your U.S. Open winner, and what do you win also? The Memorial. So I think that's a good value. You got my buddy Russ Henley, who does hit a ton of fairways and greens, one of the better iron players, I believe, on tour. It is shown here. Typically, it's the putter lately that's been struggling. Ricky Fowler playing amazing golf. Xander typically shows up in these events. Corey Connors, a good ball striker, someone that I'm interested in. I told you John Rahm, who's, kind of been out of sight, out of mind. You're getting a 13 to 1 on him. Terrell Hatton, of course, he's played amazing golf and played really good on tough courses. I think every elevated event except maybe the Genesis, I think he's had like a top 5. So again, no issues on, putting a little bet on that at 25 to 1. Denny McCarthy, we were all kind of waiting. We thought maybe the last few tournaments he would win one, and it just didn't happen. I don't really see it happening here. And then JR, who had a good chance to win, and I'm going to forget the tournament on the DP World Tour. It was a few weeks ago. So still in good form, but I don't like that number. I wouldn't bet it at 45 to 1. Okay, so I always say I do the recent form. So now I'm just looking at the past 3 tournaments these guys played. This is, I believe, pulling in the Scottish Open data. So I just wanted to confirm that if they played in it, which Colin Morikawa did not. But of course, Colin Morikawa won a couple of years back. But I, again, just don't really feel like that was an Open. I felt like that was like playing the Travelers or any tournament. It fits his game. Of hitting a ton of fairways, good iron player. It's the putter and around the green. I would say that, of course, is where Colin struggles, but I couldn't blame you if you wanted to bet him 35, 40 to 1. Of course, Rory, Ricky, Scotty Scheffler, Fleetwood, Brian Harman had also a pretty good showing at the Scottish. JR, Russ Henley, Victor Hovland, Denny McCarthy, Patrick Cantlay, of course, Brooks Koepka, Major Hunter, Adam Schenk, Keegan Bradley, and Shane Lowry are the top 15 players under recent form, no filters turned on under this model. All right, the next thing I told you, the number 1 stroke gain category that I'm interested in is best ball strikers. So that is all this is looking at. Same thing, no filters on this. Last 6 tournaments, Scotty Scheffler, Rory, Colin, Xander, Patrick Cantlay, Gary Woodland, Corey Connors, John Rahm, Victor Hovland, Fleetwood, Siwoo Kim, Hideki Matsuyama, Russ Hinley, Jordan Spieth, and this Antoine Rosner. Of course, he plays on a DP World Tour. Talked a bit of him at the Scottish. I wouldn't really take that into consideration so much as, that's 18 rounds of data. That is old data. Not saying that he could not do okay here right at the time. That I think Antoine Rosner, I mentioned this too, was in the WGC Dell Match Play. This is a few years back. He actually knocked out John Rahm, I believe, in the pool play, if I remember correctly. And that was where he kind of poked out a scene. He reminds me of, he's got the kind of strategic plotter game, and he just had a hot putter that weekend, but ultimately did get knocked out later. But that's, again, I don't follow the DP World Tour closely enough to give you anything else, but I haven't seen a ton of, when I did do the research for the Scottish, again, I didn't see where he had a bunch of like top 10s going into the tournament. All right, so one thing that, of course, Fantasy National does have is they do have a filter for windy AF, which is windy as fuck, and that is pulling in rounds, which is kind of funny. I looked at this. It did not pull in the Scottish Open Sunday round, and the reason why was because I guess something to do with stroke data, but I did be able to capture it a different way, so I'll talk about that when I get there. But anyways, if you're curious, over the last real crazy windy rounds of 8, so this is 8 rounds, this would be, probably, I don't know, including the fall of 2023, so pretty much the whole season, it pulled out the toughest rounds in the win. And I agree, because these are the typical players that I see. And actually, I think is a pretty interesting list if you want to go in. Now, some of these guys I would omit because this data would be older, and I'll talk about that. But not a bad player pool right here for the Open. Of course, Sungjae M going off. Actually, you can get him at 110 to 1 at PointsBet. Tony Finau, I believe that's on both sides, 55 to 1. I already mentioned that's kind of the guy that I'm leaning towards, hoping that he could get his first major. Got Scheffler, Corey Connors, I mentioned, just had a really nice showing, right? His 2 wins is in Texas at the Valero Open, so just one of the better ball strikers on tours. Irons have been, it's showing that they're firing here over this bit of, but I've always said he's an amazing iron player, but lately I have noticed his irons have not been as hot as they all. Of course, a lot of these guys have issues with the putter. Typically, it's like the best ball strikers do well in the win, but it's the putting. Then you got Keegan Bradley, of course, who just won the Travelers, and I think fits a lot like what could be a good showing. Also, I think he can hit that lower ball flight, right? Hits a lot of fairways and greens, and the putter has been better. You got Abraham Ancer, again, older data, live player, but under the thought process, funny enough, could be a decent fit here, but I haven't seen him do a whole lot when he has showed up on some of the PGA, whatever, players, events, the majors that he's still available for. Gary Woodland, again, amazing ball striker, made the cut at the Irish, but the putter still haunts him. Max Homa played a little better golf, right? Was up there in the leaderboard. I kind of like that 61. I have not bet him yet, but someone that I still got some betting to do, but could be someone interested in me. Of course, John Rahm, Louis Oosthuizen, what I have seen of him, not been doing a whole lot, so no thank you for Louis. And again, that data would be old. Jason Day, I feel like since his win at the Byron Nelson has kind of fallen off. Like he's missed quite a few miscuts. Then you got Tom Hoge, who it's been a struggle bus, but you can see with this data pulled, at least in the win, is back when he was striking the ball very well. Always struggled with the putter and also around the green. You got Bobby Mack. Talked quite a bit about him. JT, we all know, also has been struggling in multiple different facets, from the putter, has leaked now into off the tee and his irons, and hence why you're getting that 80 to 1. And last but not least, Shane Lowry, as always. Typically, we think of him winning the Open in very tough conditions at Royal Portrush. Okay, I mentioned the ability to bring in that very windy round 4, the final round of the Scottish Open, and what I was able to do within Fantasy National if I took courses that were very difficult to score against par, that brought that data in. So I wanted to do that also against this model for you, showing the last 24 rounds. And if you're interested, to the left here, you'll see the kind of courses and rounds that were pulled in. As I mentioned, the last round of the Genesis Scottish Open, you got the US Open, the Memorial, Charles Schwab at Colonial, the PGA Championship, the Masters, the Players, Arnold Palmer, the Genesis kind of kicking off the year, Waste Management, and the Houston Open. With that said, number 1 is Scotty Scheffler. Next would be Tommy Fleetwood, Victor Hovland, Wyndham Clark, Shane Lowry, Jordan Spieth, Patrick Cantlay, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Justin Rose, Cam Smith. Again, some of that might be a little bit older, but pulled in some of these majors he's played in. Denny McCarthy, Colin Morikawa, Ricky Fowler, and Tony Finau are your top 15 players against my stroke gain model on some very difficult courses to score on. All right, and then also, as I mentioned, the iron play is always king, especially if this does get into a scoring fest. Here's the guys that we might want to look at. If you want to understand what I'm looking at from a stroke gain approach, I got 50% on stroke gain approach across the board. That's every iron shot hit. And then the two key proximities of pins that I believe, the 75 to 100 and then 150 to 175. You've got, no shocker, Colin Morikawa leading off, Scotty Scheffler, Corey Connors. You got Hideki Matsuyama, Adam Schenk, John Rahm, my buddy Emiliano Grillo, Siwoo Kim, Brian Harmon, Russ Henley, Max Homa, JT, Chris Kirk, Tom Hoagie, Denny McCarthy, and Nick Taylor, of course, who also just won his Open in Canada, the RBC. And then the one thing also I want to look at is, just like we saw at the Scottish, we're going to have some very slow greens due to the wind, which is pretty unique for a lot of these guys that make the transition playing on the PGA Tour, where typically the greens run somewhere around 13 on the stent meter. Now we're talking somewhere around 10. What does that mean? Probably about a foot difference in putting. And if you want to know, looking over the last 24 rounds of golf on greens that were very slow, typically these would be the past palm greens. So like the Tournament of Champions, where they play at Kapalua, or maybe like Corrales, Bermuda, wherever they have slow greens because they're on these island courses. And funny enough, number one came up with Billy Horschel. Of course, you got John Rahm, who won the Tournament of Champions here recently. Terrell Hatton, you got Fleetwood, you got Lucas Herbert, who won the Bermuda Championship. JR, Xander, Reed, Finau, Denny McCarthy. The Shianik Paul, that's only 4 rounds of data, so you can kind of admit that, but he's a DP World Tour, been playing well. Also been up and down on their Ryder Cup standings for the European team. You got Tom Kim, who again showed up at the Scottish Open twice, right? So the first year he really came on our radar was last year at the Scottish Open. They went out and won the Wyndham and won at Shriners. And, the guy just kind of seems like slower greens fit him a little better. At least that's the trend we're seeing. You got Max Homa, Ben Griffin, one of the better around the green games. And then JT Poston seems like since the Travelers, his game has been getting back to form. All right, so with all that said, I did mention I've got a betting card here for you, and it's pretty light right now. I do have some more bets to put in, but I wanted to tell you where actually my money sits as we speak. And I pulled the trigger on Corey Connors, and a lot of these I've done on PointsBet. The only one that I actually did at DraftKings, because the odds were exactly the same, would be Tony Finau at 55 to 1. Corey Connors, I did get at 75 to 1. Talked quite a bit about him, just a really great ball striker. We know his around the green game and putting can be a little suspicious, but at 75 to 1, also coming off a really nice Scottish Open, maybe that translates. Also, we got the 2 wins in Texas, typically windy conditions at the Valero. You got King and Bradley, who just won at the Travelers. Also has really shown up. He won the Zozo in the fall. His putter's been a lot better. He treats it like the samurai sword, which I always find a little amusing when he makes a putt. But I also got him at 110 to 1 over at PointsBet. Ben Wyan just been playing great golf. I got him at 151 at PointsBet. And also seems like his putting showed up again at the Scottish. Sungjae Im, his form has not been that great. But if we take Sungjae Im as a whole, what we know is he's like a swing machine. He just hits a ton of fairways, got a little bit of distance, but very accurate. Usually one of the better iron players. And the short game I have no problem with in the putter. But recent form tells us that we're going to need a little better than what we've been seeing. And then, of course, Bobby Mack, which I'm sure some people have got better odds. I got him at 100 to 1 over at PointsBet. But with what he's done in the Open over the past few years and what we just saw with a really good chance to win the Scottish, of course, I was going to take that and hope maybe he gets his win this week. So with all that said, that is where I'm lie. I typically get some more odd boosts. So I think I got an odd boost, and I use that on, maybe it was Tony from DraftKings. But as those keep coming in like daily, I'll probably put some maybe bets on Victor Hovland that I would like to get a little better odds on than at 22 to 1. If I get it like 25 to 1, then I'll put a bet on him. Okay, with that said, that will be the wrap up from the preview show. Now let's go jump over to Fantasy National. Let's do a little more deeper dive analysis on this player pool. Okay, so I've hopped over into Fantasy National, and as always, my plug for them, if you are putting any kind of money from a DFS perspective or bets, I highly recommend this tool. It is totally for golf, and it has all the information you need to put in those smart bets and make some amazing picks. That's my plug. Let's get moving along. As always, we're going to be using Draftkings pricing, but you can use these picks for FanDuel or whatever format you're wanting to use. Of course, I'm going to be looking at the past 24 rounds of golf. I've got no filters turned on, but as always, I've already done a lot of pre-work on this. And what we're going to be looking at here is what I call the mini model. You've got a lot of information here. You've got what their salary is, projected ownership right now, cuts made, the 5 stroking categories that I'm looking at, and you can see the weight. If I click on this right here, you got good drives at 25%. If you do not know what that is hitting the fairway, first cut of rough, and then hitting the green on approach. That's a combination of good drives. You got ball striking at 24, approach at 24. Then you've got short game, which combines around the green and putting. And then again, putting all at 14%. So that gives you the understanding of the weightings if you are trying to also do this in Fantasy National. And as mentioned, we're going to look at bogey avoidance over the last 24 rounds of golf. We want to see that green bar going up. And then recent results. What have these guys done in the past 5 tournaments they played in? You've got that there. And then, of course, past history at the Open. You can see that on the right side. Okay. With that said, I've got 20 picks that I'm going to be using in the player pool for the Milli-Maker. That is what the focus of this is, just so you know. And right off the bat, you've got Scottie Scheffler coming in at a whopping 12,500. And then you've got Rory at 11.9, Jon Rahm at 11.2, and then Cam Smith, we'll put him in that bucket at 10.7. And why not? We'll put Brooks in there too at 10.4. So that's your top 5 guys. But let's just focus on the first 3. I honestly have no issue with any of them. I'm going to be fading Jon Rahm just a little bit. Typically, this has not been his best major. His best showing would have been back in 2021. He's also coming off a 3-week hiatus. Not saying that maybe his game's still in perfect condition, but you've got to make some choices here, and that is how I'm talking myself out of Jon Rahm. And then Scottie Scheffler, of course, all he does is top 5 or better for, geez, I don't know, it seems like the whole year, either a win or a top 5. But you've got a very hefty price tag right now, projected ownership, which I have a hard time believing, but what it's stating at least right now is at the whopping 23%. And of course, the putter has been the issue of why a lot of these third places, T3s, second places have not been a bunch more wins. But you can see the guy does everything we want from a stroke game perspective, and also is very, bogey avoidance free. So out of the top guys, also if you throw Cameron Smith in there, I told you guys earlier in the show, I like him. If his ownership stays this low, then I will probably play some Cam Smith and take the risk that he clubs down and hits a lot more fairways. But as the biggest bugaboo right now, of course, we're not also getting a lot of information and stroke gain data from Cam Smith, except from the majors. So it's a little hard to compare him. Also, if you don't know, he did just win a live event. I think it was like a week ago or so. Again, don't watch the live event, but hey, it's against 40 guys playing a slap and tickle and some shorts. But consider what it is. They are pros. So at least what I'm getting to is the guy didn't start really playing golf this year until the Masters, and his game has just been trending upward, as you see. So I have no issue with playing Cam. And then Koepka, of course, 5-time major winner, typically comes out and tries to win. But I would say this is maybe if it goes to a scoring fest, which there is the possibility. Again, we got to keep an eye. I think it's not going to be that. But again, I'm going to kind of not go with Mr. Brooks. And I'm going to go to Rory, which is very chalky. I think this is where everybody goes. His ownership is probably down because people think, back-to-back trying to win, and everything really points to Rory. So that's when people like me will go, hey, he's won here before, but he hasn't won a major in the last, 10 years or so. So I'm not going to play Rory. Well, I'm actually going to go the other way. Everything tells me to play Rory. His game isn't perfect. He's actually been making putts. Let's go take a look at him real quick. I want to see what his wedge iron play has been doing. So I don't have, of course, the Genesis for some odd reason. I thought, let me go look at this real quick. I'm not sure why that would not be getting pulled in. Let's go to strokes gained. Somehow I was getting that information. Just a second. Let me go look at something else. Okay, for some reason, Fantasy National was not showing us the stroke gain data, but of course I had it on the recap, so I wanted to just pull it up real fast. And if we look at, of course, Rory was gaining 5.5 strokes with the iron, so we're good there. So that's what I wanted to just quickly, and I thought I'd show it to you guys too. So let's hop back into Fantasy National. Okay, yeah, that's really weird that for whatever reason right now, Fantasy National is not giving us the strokes for that. But long story short, that's why I wanted to show you. Yeah, the irons have been great. The big thing for me is what he's been doing with the putter. And I'm not saying that I won't put in some Scotty Scheffler, but out of these top 5, I'd see most bills starting with either Scotty or Rory. And then depending on ownership, to get a little contrarian, I will play some Cam. So that's how my top of the board is going to. So then the next bracket here, you get down to 10-1, and that's where Xander is, and that's the guy that I'll be going with technically my second play over like a Koepka or a Cam Smith. And of course, his last win was at the Genesis Scottish Open last year, and then he won the Travelers before that. But I really, in playing this, in my mind, that it's going to be more of a grind out. Could be, I don't know, 10 under to 12 under is where, under the conditions, that's where I'm seeing this ended up. And that's where I like to play Xander. So that's where I'm going. And then, of course, Victor Hovland is at an even 10,000. You see Victor has had 2 good showings here at the Open. The short game's gotten better. The putter's better. Of course, he just won at a very difficult course at the Memorial and had a good Genesis. I think, if he could have had a better Sunday, things would have worked out a little bit better. But you can also see Victor Hovland is showing a little chalky, Xander not as much. I'm actually out on Patrick Cantlay. I mentioned this in the preview show that I just feel like he's had a lot of opportunities like the Memorial where that's typically where he shines, and it did not work out. And I just, again, in majors, he typically does not show up as, paying off that almost $10,000 salary. He's missed a cut in 2021 in very easy conditions. At St. Andrews last year, he had a T8. I want at least a 5th or better out of those guys that I'm paying at. So that's what I'm expecting out of these 2 guys. So I'm going to pass. I'll actually go to Ricky. Of course, had a chance back in 2014 to win this event at this course. But also, of course, he's coming off a recent win. Also, that Genesis Scottish Open, he played better than what that T42 shows. But I've been playing great golf and good short game. And also, he's doing everything from tee to green that I want. You can make an argument for Jordan Spieth, and again, back to projected ownership, and I'm talking about the Milli-Maker here. I would actually make the change from Ricky and go with Jordan, even though, right now a lot of people are off him because he's had 2 missed cuts in a row. But you can see at the Open, this is where, his best major, maybe you can make that question against the Masters. But I really like his creativity and what he does on this course. We're going to need his short game, and especially if the conditions are windy. So with that now, I kind of missed that projected ownership. I'm going to make that switch. I'm going to do that live for you guys. So yeah, that's where I'm going to land with Jordan. And then I'm going to pass on Colin. Of course, your past champion 2 years ago at this event, as you see there, but missed the cut last year. A lot of that is just due to the putter short game. Of course, tee to green, I think it fits well, but I don't know. I'm trying to think the last time that I saw Colin Morikawa play in very difficult conditions on a difficult course and what he did. It would have been nice to see what he did at the Scottish, but also that ownership's got me off him. Funny enough, again, if Hatton's too chalky, I have no problem to go to Fitzy. Of course, he's had some good showings here, and where we know that Fitzy typically does well in a grind out fest. You can see the driver has been a little wayward, but he's also got a win not shown here at the RBC Heritage this year. Also was dealing with some neck and back issues, so I think his record would even be better, but I feel like he's over that. Also had a good showing at the Memorial, and U.S. Open, of course, won their prior year. So, I will make that switch, but right now I am going to stick with Hatton. It's not over 20% showing. Again, on the lock show tomorrow, we'll go over projected ownerships, and I'll give you my final kind of thoughts. But right now, you're getting the player pool as is. And Terrell Hatton, I've already talked about. All the elevated events, the guy is like top 5 except for the Genesis. You can see what he did at the RBC Canadian Open. Of course, should have had a good chance if he wouldn't have had kind of a fall apart on the back 9 at the Genesis. Could have won that event, and also has had good showings here. So no problem to plug in Terrell Hatton. And then, of course, Tommy Fleetwood, I talked about in the preview show over the last 5 tournaments. I think he was, second in strokes gain at the Open. You can see a 4th, a 2nd, a 12th. And also could have had a good chance to win the RBC Canadian Open in that playoff against Nick Taylor if he didn't drain a 70-plus footer for Eagle. And also a good showing at the Open, a good showing at the Scottish. So everything, Tommy's playing some amazing golf. This could be his time. he's due for a win here. I'm going to go with it. You know, DJ, of course, I think he did win what, Tulsa Live event. I don't know, just what I've watched out of DJ. Of course, he's had a pretty strong record here back to back, but I don't know, I'm just not sold on it. Again, the price tag, he was like what, in the 8,000s, I feel like in the last major, maybe like 8,900, so not a huge change. But I'm going to pass on DJ. I'd rather actually play Shane, which I'm not picking him, but I'm just telling you for that price tag, I would switch to Shane. I'm curious on how many people are going to play Cameron Young, right? He had the opportunity to play in the weakest field ever at the John Deere and still could not win. The guy's short game putting has been a disaster, which you see out of 156 players. He ranks over 100th in both of those. And even off the tee, even though he's got exemplary length, one of the longest drivers on tour, I don't need that. I need guys to hit the fairway. So I'm going to pass. I think Hideki Matsuyama, I'm going to keep an eye on that ownership. I think for the price tag, it's a pretty good value from a betting side. You know, I think it's a great value. Like I said, 100 to 1. Yeah, the guy's game's been coming along. Yes, he missed a cut at the Rocket Mortgage, which doesn't help his case. And really, I guess you could look at his career at the Open's not the greatest either. But he typically has a very good short game. Of course, he's exemplary. What makes me worried is the driver, and I'm still worried about it. So I will pass on Hideki for now, but I'll keep an eye on that ownership. I think DeChambeau is, you know, again, I don't think it's a bad play. I feel like his game has gotten better and better. Of course, we got to see that at the PGA Championship, pretty good U.S. Open. I'm not picking him, but again, I'm going to keep an eye on that ownership. And if it stays that low, I might actually plug him in over maybe, you know, like a Wyndham Clark who's super chalky, again, with a focus on the Milli-Maker. But I'm sticking with my picks right now. I'm just letting you know there could be some lineup changes on an ownership side where guys I still think could do very well, and I think DeChambeau could fit into that. But yeah, I'm going to go Wyndham Clark, of course. Ownership is still not at 20%, but that's a good price tag. He's doing everything we want. In the last 6 tournaments he's played. Bogey avoidance. Of course, he won the U.S. Open. And what did I say? He won the Memorial. I think I said that in the preview show. I apologize. It was actually the Wells Fargo, which then he went out and missed the cut like in the next event, which maybe it was the PGA Championship. So I apologize. I redacted that from the preview show if I said that. But yeah, I like Wyndham Clark. I'm out on JT, just straight across the board. You know, great price tag. He's been, you know, great. At some point, I've just got to see something. And that Travelers, I think we all got a little excited when he had a T9. But yeah, just not enough. And then missed the cut at the Rocket Mortgage. I'll be out on that. Burnsley, actually, which was a pick of mine for the Scottish Open. And I think it was a pretty good pick. T19. You know, I think he was up there, day 1 or day 2 on the leaderboard, had a chance to keep moving along. I'll keep an eye on that ownership. Of course, his, you know, past record here is not the greatest. At least he made the cut a couple times, but could be a switch for me also. Same with Homa. Right now, he's not in the player pool, but I'm going to keep an eye on that ownership. I think it could be, especially if it's windy. Okay, moving on to Tony Finau. I already told you guys he's on the cover, and I think a lot of people are going to be off Tony. I think his game is going to fit perfect here if it does get super windy. We know he's had a strong record in the Open. Ownership is kind of showing that, but the putter is probably making a few people nervous. But yep, I'm all over that. No thank you on Tom Kim. I think a lot of people are going to jump on this, on what he did at the Genesis, and I think that could come back to haunt you and could actually end up in a miscut. I just don't trust it. I got to see another event out of Tom Kim. You know, Justin Rose, I have no problem with. You know, I'm going to put him in actually the player pool. We'll see what that ownership does, but I'll keep an eye on that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to switch that on the fly. Let's put Adam Scott in there, less than 6% own. Pretty much the same price tag, and I think you're about the same price. So that's where I'm going to go. Adam Scott, we can look at him real quick. Yeah, I mean, decent. And I guess Justin Rose, best showing recently was 2018. I'm trying to remember. Didn't he win the Open at one time? Oh, I'm forgetting. Let's take a look real fast. Nope. What was I thinking? Maybe that was, what, the U.S. Open? Yeah, nope, that was the U.S. Open back in 2013. Get him confused at times. Jason Day, nope, I kind of mentioned since the Byron Nelson, I don't know, I feel like he's right back to just very unpredictable. Taylor Gooch, I'm actually a little bit interested in. Of course, he's had, 3 wins on the Live Tour. He's had 2 decent showings. So for that price tag, you know what, on the fly, I'm going to put him in the player pool as I did Adam Scott. Like I said, I'm trying to get this up to 25. I had it at 20. Minwoo Lee, I can't get you right, so I'm just going to go ahead and pass. This will probably be the time. I think I picked him for the Genesis, had him on my cover now. He still got you a T35. I was hoping for a bit more. For some reason, projected ownership ain't coming in. I know people are playing him, so I'll keep an eye on that, but I'm worried about that driver. I told you guys Corey Connors, I bet him. His ownership's already super chalky. I think for that price tag, it feels like a safe play. It's also had a couple decent finishes here. But yeah, and also what he did at the Scottish, I think everybody's excited to that. Reed, no thank you. Again, I'm going to keep an eye on that ownership because, if you're going with the idea, and again, we don't have he hasn't won on the Live Tour, I don't think ever. But good showing at the Masters, good showing at the PGA. And we know what he can do with his short game. So I don't know. I got to think about that one. Right now, he is on a kind of 50-50, but I'm going to go with Keegan for sure. I told you I'm betting him. Not the greatest track history here, except in 2016, but he also had just had to win at the Travelers. He won at the Zozo. He hits a ton of fairways. The putter has been, out of this whole field, ranked 8th for the past 6 tournaments. So I'm on that. I thought about a place to hit, but you could see how bad the driver, he's just been so wayward at. I love his shot making ability, but I can't have it here. Joaquin, he's going to be a game time decision also because I need projected ownership because his ball striking and he hits a very low stinging ball flight. It's just the putter and the short game got me a little worried. So that's, again, a kind of a little bit on the fence. Ryan Fox, I took a shot at the Genesis with him. I picked him. He ended up T12. You know what? I'm actually going to go with Joaquin. I'm going to do it now so you guys have it. And I'll pass on Fox because I was also thinking about Harris English of playing him. But I think I'm going to hold off on that one. Russ Henley, I don't know. I feel like fool's gold here. I mean, he's been playing, top 20 or better since, the John Deere was a little more struggle. But yeah, right now I'm going to pass on him. Abraham. I'm going to go with a guy that I typically don't play, which will probably come back and haunt me. But I got a feeling about Brian Harman, of course. Pretty good showings back to back, but of course that was really good conditions. And that's, again, part of this. I'm letting you guys know that some game time decisions are going to be made like right before tee off on some of these builds because I want to really probably go with flight advantages and just can't get a good feeling for what the weather is going to do right at this moment. But I'm giving you the guys that, I guess, with knowing that there's going to be some weather, I still feel pretty good with these guys. Siwoo, I don't know. I don't really have a super issue with him. 7,300, so I could see where you could flip flop those guys out. I mentioned that I'm not going to bet Denny McCarthy, but I do like what he's been doing. You see his short game, the putter, of course, a lot of that comes with the putter, but his ball striking has been really good too. A lot of almost had a chance to win the Memorial, which is not a bad comp course as in just difficulty. But yeah, so I'm going to play some Denny. I think that's a good price tag. You can also see the model loves him at 3. Ahmad Amarank, Kitayama for a little bit there. When it was round 1, showed up at the Genesis. He had one good round, which got me a little nervous. Of course, won the API earlier this year in an elevated event, very tough track. And so we've seen he can do it, but every time I try to pull that out, he goes ahead and misses a cut. Seamus Power WD'd after 9 holes. I don't know why. So until I find out why he pulled out, and he also pissed me off because he burned some of my lineup. So as you see, ownership's very low. Until we know why, I don't think anybody's going to be rostering that dude. I'd rather go to Adam Schenk, who's been playing really good golf. And actually, it looks like this is his first time playing the Open. So we don't know enough, but I guess if I went and thought about it, of course, the Memorial is a good comp. The Rocket, it's a very flat course, but I would not compare it. So I don't know. I might sprinkle in some Adam Schenk. No thank you on Peters, Noren, Nikolai Horgaard, right, had a good Sunday. I might think about that, but you see kind of medium. But again, hard sample of data on what we have there. Well, not too bad, I guess, for Nikolai. Maybe it's Rasmus. Woodland, I've tried that. Great ball striker. Good price tag. Yeah, I'm going to pass. Nick Taylor, I don't know. Had an okay Genesis, a couple miscuts there. I don't know. Right now, the model says but I'm going to go ahead and pass on him. I think I did a Lucas Herbert pick last week, and that didn't work out so great with his comps against wind in the Bermuda. And also, he's had 2 good showings at the Genesis, not last year, but the prior. So, I don't know. Right now, I'm going to say no. I am betting Benoit, but I'm going to leave it at that. Sub Straka, I know, yes, he won the John Deere, but this guy, it's either very hit or miss with him. And I like what he's been doing from a ball striking perspective. Only played in the Open once and he missed the cut. But if projected ownership stays this low, I'm going to be in on Seb. Pass on Rasmus. I could never play Phil Mickelson in any event, so just take it for that. And that's why, if you like him, play him, but I just won't do it. I'm out on Romaine Lettuce. I'm out on Louis. Billy Ho, I think I went on a bit of a stretch because of how cheap he was, and I think I bet him. I don't know if I picked him last week, but I bet him, and he got me a nice T65. Learmouth had a nice showing at the Scottish, so see if anybody jumps on that. Brandon Grace, no thank you. I don't know, last time I think of him was the PGA Championship. Am I right with that? Was he involved with Phil Mickelson in 2021? Maybe it's the U.S. Open I'm thinking about. It could be. Is that the year when Dickie Bland also showed up, I think? Bobby Mack, 6,800 in DFS. No questions. He's had amazing finishes here. I think I will be super shocked if his ownership comes in less than 10%. I think you can't really trust this right now. I've got to do that kind of look at it tomorrow. I like this Jordan Smith. He's kind of shown me a couple good showings on what we've had. And I got to take some European, so I'll go with Jordan Smith. I'll give that a flyer. And you can say Bjork has played pretty good. Seabass, no, I can't do it. Brendan Todd was my pick to win the John Deere. I was all over that, right? We 80-1. I thought we had something really cooking, and then he fell apart on me on the last few holes. But 6,700, if he gives you a top 30, he's paying that off in DFS. No thank you, Thorborn, Victor Perez, Padre. He does make cuts. So I guess a 6,600 if you want to contemplate. But man, I think talent-wise, I still like Griot better. My pure ball striking. I don't know if he's ever done anything. I guess he had a T12 at, again, if you want to call that an Open. The year Morikawa won it, again, I think it was just perfect conditions. And that's where if these guys, the ball strikers, if it does hold up or no wind, give me the guys that can go low. And that could be a Griot if the putter keeps working. Yannick Paul, again, I'll take a couple of DP World Tour guys. Good chance that he might still make the Ryder Cup and playing good golf over there on the DP World Tour, so why not? Andrew Putnam, I think, could be a little sneaky. The guy is not long, but man, is he accurate. Good short game. I've always said he's a little bit like a Mackenzie Hughes, like a really, really cheap poor man's Cam Smith, but actually hits fairways but don't have length. So, for 6,500, for sure, throw me in. No Tom Hoagie, I know you showed up for a couple rounds at the Scottish, but I think your game's still a bit broken. Funny, I didn't even notice Lee Hodges. He does show up in some tough events. You can see the Memorial, the Canadian Open. So kind of interesting. Maybe a showdown finale play. Don't know if I have anybody else rostered. Nope. That is it. There's Dickie Bland. And the Ben Griffin could be a little interesting. I don't have I know there's, a bit of talk on Southgate for a pure, 5,800, which is kind of funny. It's the first time I've ever seen, I guess because they made Scotty so expensive that they made a below price tag. Okay, nope, nothing to worry about. All right, let me summarize my picks for the DraftKings Milli-Maker. I end up with 23 guys. That'll be my player pool. Again, there'll be some game time decisions depending on weather, but gun to my head right now, if I had to put my lineups in, this is who I'm going with. Most expensive guy will be Rory in. Next would be Xander. Got Victor Hovland, Jordan Spieth, Terrell Hatton, Tommy Fleetwood, Wyndham Clark, Tony Finau, Adam Scott, The Gooch, Corey Connors, Keegan Bradley, Joaquin Neiman, Brian Harmon, Denny McCarthy, Adam Shank, Seb Straka, Bobby Mack, Jordan Smith, Brendan Todd, Emiliano Grillo, Yannick Paul, and Andrew Putnam is the lowest I would go at 6,500. That will be the 23 guys that I'll be working with. Again, some things might change last minute. All right, guys, that's it. I wanted to get you those picks. I will come out with a Before the Lock show tomorrow, and let's jump out and wrap this thing up. All right, guys, so as always, thank you for your time, and if you do me the honor, click that like button, share it with anybody else, and if for some reason you have not subscribed or you're checking me out for the first time, I would greatly appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. Typically, I put out 2 to 3 shows per week, all depending on the tournament. And if you would like, follow me on the Twitter sphere at DFS Golf Guru, where I will keep you updated on anything that I see from the PGA or any withdrawals or anything that's funny that transpires during the golf tournament. I will tweet it out. All right, guys. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, we'll have a Before the Lock show where we'll go over the weather, AM, PM flights, all that stuff, and we'll see ownership projection and see where this is all going to shake out. All right, guys. I will talk to you tomorrow.